everybody. Yeah, nice night for a meeting at an airport. Thank you everybody for coming, truly. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Evan Robinson. I'm the Vermont Agency of Transportation Aviation Program Manager. I want to first of all thank you again for coming. As you'll find out, we're undertaking a large-scale effort to take a good look at our aviation policies. And a big part of the success of this effort is reliant on the feedback we're going to get from the users here. So just thank you. Again, thank you to Chapter 613 of the EAA for opening the doors to accommodate such a robust crowd here. It's a great representation of a great relationship with the aviation community and the agency. So thank you, EAA, for opening your doors here. Appreciate it. So the priorities for the aviation program are to provide safe and compliant airports in the state of Vermont. And in doing that as well, to provide opportunities for the growth of the aviation industry and to support economic development at our airports, as well as growing commercial and civil aviation opportunities. Now, to do that, as one would imagine, it's very important to have a sound set and a strong foundation of airport use policies and guidelines that are transparent, communicative, and are able to be updated on a periodical basis. Upon review of the current existing airport policies, there's certainly room to bring those up to meet aviation's needs in Vermont in 2025 and into the future. So that's really the basis of this effort, is to establish from the ground up the aviation use policies, as well as looking to make amendments and provide consistency to the lease agreements that go along with tenants and businesses and civil users operating on the airport. Could you advance the slide, please, Chris? So just a little bit tonight, we have a three-part agenda, fairly short, well, five, but three important high-level topics here. We're going to spend a little bit of time bringing everybody up to speed about airports in Vermont and the relationships to the community, the relationships with the federal government, a little bit of education on funding. Then we're going to specifically speak on this project itself, what the process that we've set into motion to bring these policies into the current era. And then what we're really here for is to hear from you all. And we hope that the attentiveness throughout the presentation is prompts ideas in addition to the feedback you already have. So be listening and be seeing what we're presenting from our perspective, and we're hopeful that it, again, prompts the feedback from you all. I'm grateful to have with us here virtually Rob Lucchini, who has his screen on, bottom right corner. He's tough to see. Rob is the project manager supporting VTrans from the aviation consultant McFarland Johnson, who is here to walk us through this process and to support us with this big effort. And here in the room also, in the right-hand green comfy chair, we have Michael Sherling, who many of you all know as a longtime Vermont pilot and public service figure in the city of Burlington and through the state of Vermont in various capacities. With that, a couple housekeeping items. We have an emergency exit here. There's restrooms in the back. And what we will do when we get to the public input, we'll start with folks in the room. Again, we'll give reminders, but we'll have you come up to this area. Our microphone cord is only so long. We'll have you clearly state your name and then provide your feedback. And then we'll get to the online folks following that. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over presentation aspect to Rob Lucchini. And Rob, take it away. Thanks.
Thank you, Evan. Just as I start here in a moment, but I just want to apologize for not being there in person. I have a very pregnant wife, and we're expecting our baby due any day now. So I'm on baby watch, and I appreciate your patience for getting this face talking to you and listening to what I have to say. And before we Before we jump into this too far, I just want to talk about, just as a real high level, what minimum standards are. And we're going to leave it defined here. So minimum standards are policies in which all persons, firms, or other legal entities conducting commercial or non-commercial aeronautical activities at the airport shall conduct their respective operations. And so it's a long way of saying the purpose of this is to discuss policy, operational policy, lease policy, the minimum standards at the airport. And next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, just as a show of hands here, just so I can get a sense, and I'll use my, I can see folks here through the camera, but as a show of hands, how many folks here are airport users? Folks that are pilots, own, well, quite a few here, yeah, own hangars, any sort of, all right. And then from a show of hands as well, from the online community and as well in their live, who here is just a neighbor maybe, or someone in the municipality who maybe isn't as familiar with aviation, and it's just like, okay, you scared all of them away. All right, so we have a bunch of users here, and that's great. Okay, so I'm going to bore you a little bit with some education components, and I hope you can withstand some of this maybe lesser fancy and exciting information, but I think important to go through. And then we'll go into the policy. Mike will take over. He's much more entertaining and better looking there in person. And we'll have a communication discussion about how we're going to communicate moving forward, and how that's an important part of the aviation program. But the really important part of this is to get feedback from the public. So one of the ways we're going to try to foster that conversation is we're going to provide some early feedback that we've received from the public, from our conversations at other airports and what we've seen so far through our surveys that we've sent out. And so these surveys is a snapshot of information through a questionnaire, and it provides some insight, but it doesn't give you all of the context of what's most important to the users, especially the ones at Franklin County here. We're also going to talk about known friction points that the AOT is acknowledging, and we're going to try to articulate them from both the perspective of the AOT and of the user, with the concept of knowing that we're going to address these issues, not necessarily solve them here tonight, and then we're going to have your feedback, and we're going to encourage folks from the community to provide their comment, so that can assist the team in making sure that as policy is created, it's done in mind, not just with the compliance of FAA, but with what's best for Vermonters. And so tonight's focus will be understanding these issues to help identify pathways forward. I appreciate everyone's involvement in taking the time out of your Thursday. Next slide. We have beautiful state. Next slide. They pay us by the slide here, so. All right, what do we have here in Vermont? You can see this sort of figure on the left that depicts some of these green aircraft that depict the different 10 airports that are state-owned. And so that includes 65 miles of runway, 85 miles of taxiway, 1.7 million square feet of aprons, 270 acres of runway safety area, 24 miles of security fence with 23 automated gates, a lot of facilities, including 9 terminal buildings, 8 storm removal equipment buildings, and a house. And so there is a significant array of different airports across the state, and there's a significant amount of infrastructure associated with that the AOT manages and operates. Now, how do we get all of this? Next slide. Well, these airports were purchased through an FAA grant program. And the current FAA grant program is the Airport Improvement Program. Now, all of the FAA grants come with what's called grant assurances, or obligations that the state, as they enter these agreements, which makes the state now the sponsor, that's analogous for the state, the sponsor has obligations, 39 of these, to the FAA in how they operate and maintain these facilities. So the very fact that these 10 airports exist come from this grant system, and we continually use this grant system today. So I'm going to get into a little bit of that funding source and what it means for the AOT to be a sponsor of these 10 airports. Next slide. The grant assurances. There are many to talk about, but just as a brief overview. Everything that you would imagine in the safety and operation, as that's paramount to the FAA, How the AOT operates and maintains these airfields is heavily regulated by the FAA. Everything from hazard removal to conformance with long-term planning. FAA has a series of long-term planning documents that the AOT as a sponsor has to maintain and apply to. And with that comes FAA inspections and approval. So the long-term plan of the airport, how the airport's being maintained, all of this, and any construction project includes FAA inspection, as one would imagine. This is really pertinent and important to the compatibility of land use. When FAA issues a grant for procuring some piece of land or property, there's an intended use for that land, and it's critical for the FAA to see that piece of land is used as intended, as well as something more obvious, maybe that's the pavement maintenance. Now, these are public assets, so they have to be fair and equal access, no unjust discrimination for one individual or another. There can't be a situation where someone has an advantage or has more access to the airfield than another individual using the airfield. There's also a civil rights component to this in construction with the DBE programs and veterans preference. In financial accountability, it's important to recognize that the FAA has a strict rule in revenue. All airport revenue has to be paid and used on the airfield. There cannot be non-aeronautical use for that revenue. That would be considered a revenue diversion and is not allowed. These airports are striving for self-sustainability through a transparent and clear fee and rental structure to meet those ends, passing audits, and this accountability includes even the change of land use. If the land was then to be changed for purpose, for example, there's a heavy scrutiny in an application process, or review process from the FAA in any sort of change in land use. Now, there's also a public-government partnership, consistency with local regional planning, but really important here, this has to be done in conjunction with users and through the public, the general public, and that's why we're here today. And so that's a little insight about some of the parameters that the FAA puts on the AOT as a sponsor through accepting this money. Next slide, please. And so what is this money and how does it get here? A lot of people think, well, that's just our tax dollars. And what's unique about the AIP program, the Airport Improvement Program, is it comes from the Airway Trust Fund. Now, the Airway Trust Fund is a user-funded program. That means it's not a direct tax dollars. It comes from ticket fees, cargo fees, aviation fuel and tax, and other user fees. So the use of the aviation world in the United States funds through a series of fees and taxes through that process into a fund that Congress appropriates to the FAA, who disseminates it through a grant system. Now, only airports in the National Plan of Integrated Airports, or the NIPIAS airports, receive funds, and 9 of these airports with VTrans, the AOT owns those airports and is a part of that NIPIAS. So those airports eligible for receiving these funds get it through this process. And so it's a little bit of an insight to folks on how this money is generated and how it's procured to the state as a sponsor. Next slide. So how much money are we talking about here? In the last 5 years, it's just under $28 million. And this figure, if it's hard to see, I know it's been hard to see at some of these airports with our program moving from airport to airport, but at the top here you have the most amount of money from that $27.8 million going to each of the projects, and what you'll see is at the top that take most of this money is all regarding safety. A rehabilitation of runways at 5.3, constructing taxiways at 37, reconstructing runways, construction, marking, lighting, and removal, extending runways, all to do specifically with safety at these airports. Now that is because the money that comes through these grant systems, the FAA has a degree of influence on. There's a national priority ranking system that says this money should and ought to be spent on first and foremost on safety projects, or what they deem as safety projects at these airports. Next slide, please. So let's talk quickly about some of this grant. the Airport Improvement Program has competitive grants, discretionary grants, or non-competitive grants with entitlement grants. There's also a slew of smaller other grants that are disseminated from that, but the Airport Improvement Program, which is an important point to mention, means that these grants for those construction projects account for 95% of the money spent. So when you do a big construction project through these grants, it's 95% funded by the FAA. I'm going to ask folks who joined late to just make sure you're staying muted through this presentation until there's an opportunity for public input. So what I was mentioning for the Airport Improvement Program is that there's that 95-5 split, and that obvious really good use of AOT dollars is dictated largely through what FAA deems as the priority of projects. Now there's also the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, which also follows 95-5, which is a short-term funding influx that's going to expire in 2026, but also follows that same 95-5 split and is based on that same national priority ranking system. Next slide. So you have a sense of what these grants, how they are funded, why we use them, what that means to the state as an AOT sponsor, and how far they go. So 95% of these costs getting paid by the federal government through user-funded programs. That 5% comes from the state T fund, or the transportation fund allocation. Now, the majority of the budget that we have in the state T funds does not go to that 5%. That 5% is a very small portion of what is allocated by the state T fund towards these airports. The majority of what's being spent onto the T fund is maintaining and operating these facilities. All of those facilities mentioned earlier in the presentation, the upkeep and keeping the lights on at your hangars and snow removal equipment buildings and terminal buildings is all financed through the T fund, as well as other operating costs. The vegetation management at some of these airports is a fancy title or a discussion term here, but it could include something as simple as mowing over the 1,000 acres of the land that we just had indicated, but also lesser known items. As you're cutting and taking down obstructions for the aircraft, there has to be a maintenance portion of this that maintains that doesn't regrow back and become obstructions because now you have all this open and available lush area that is ideal for tree growth. There's also, in the winter climate, snow removal and de-icing over the 215 acres of pavement at these airports, as well as all of the equipment, tools, vehicles, and training facilitated with that. Now, through that national priority ranking systems, there are some items that have a lesser priority that then still require some sort of attention. For example, sometimes your gates or your fuel facilities or fencing. There are projects, especially revenue-producing projects, that have severe penalties through the grant system and have the lowest of priorities. In other words, if I said, let's say I want to spend money and build a new fuel farm, and there are projects that are needed to address safety, such as clearing or runway or taxiway or apron projects, though the FAA would say, well, no, you first have to address those projects before you can spend money on something like a revenue-producing fuel farm. And if you do opt to use a revenue-producing fuel farm, there are severe penalties from the AIP program that you will not be able to access that discourage that sort of operation. And so oftentimes, any sort of projects such as those revenue-producing projects, they would typically need to be funded through the T fund. Next slide, please. So what sort of projects are we anticipating right now that we have these grants for FY25 or fiscal year 25? Well, some things that we can just go through here. In Rutland, there's an obstruction study and as well as a PAPI project. At Morrisville, we have a taxiway alpha extension and property acquisition. At Hartness, we have a PAPI project as well as the runway reconstruction project through its design phases. Bennington, we're doing a master plan. At Middlebury, some snow removal equipment, and as always, statewide paving maintenance. Next slide, please. So why are we updating these standards? And I think it was briefly mentioned earlier in the presentation with Evan, but they're generally outdated. And as the economics change in Vermont, and as companies, as they're trying to operate, or individuals trying to operate on the airfield, the needs of the aviation community changes, so do the standards. And so as we're updating these standards, we want to make sure that they're done in a way that's both transparent to everyone, but as well as consistent across all the state airports. It would be unfair for there to be a standard at Highgate, but it would be different than the standard at Berlin. As well as these standards need to be adhering to FAA compliance. And also with community feedback, it's very important to have stakeholders such as yourself to have a chance to provide your point of view as we're making such standards. Next slide. I know I'm very long-winded here, but there's only a few more for me, and then you'll have Mike with the more important stuff to get into. So let's get into some really riveting information. What are our goals? We have to go through these because through any successful process, you have to know the aiming principles in which you're trying to accomplish. And when we get into the comment period, I encourage anyone to provide perspectives on policy, or even perspectives on our process and what we're doing. So what are our goals? Our first goal is to promote safe and compliant airports. That's number one. It's an obvious one. It's in our system plan, but it's important to state. That's our goal. But also, we're looking to provide transparent and adaptable policy. Now, what does that mean? Well, we really don't want to create a policy and say, this is the best policy that's ever been made, this is the best minimum standards, and that's the end of it. And then again, 10, 20 more years. Again, 10, 20 years down the road, we end up finding ourselves having to redo all these standards again because they've become well stale. So the intent and the goal here is to make sure that we have a process that allows these policies to adapt over time and can be updated not just through this effort, but past this effort. Supporting public and private investment in the state of airports with long-term planning. It's understanding that there is a place for public funds, but also a place for private funds, as well as the public and private funds used in maintenance and rehabilitation through this infrastructure. Ensuring clear and comprehensive and consistent policy to that end. Efficient and scalable economic development. So we're looking for increased economics, obviously, at each of these airports, but what that looks like changes from airport to airport, and is scalable in size for that airport. We want to foster and promote community and stakeholder engagement across the airports, which we're doing here tonight, and promote diversified commercial and non-commercial aviation use of the airports. So promote civil aviation in Vermont. Next slide, please. So we have some economics to discuss here, and this all comes from the Vermont Airport Economics Impact Assessment 2021. There's a direct employment from these airports of 224 individuals in the state of Vermont with over $8.6 million of direct payroll. There's an indirect employment of 365 individuals in Vermont. That's over $2 million of tax per year, with a direct annual economic activity of just under $23.5 million, or an indirect just under $18 million, with a total annual economic activity of just under $41.5 million. So to say that economics is important because certainly these airports do play a role in the economics of Vermont. Next slide, please. A little bit of what you might see outside, or we will be seeing outside, is some science coming up. And it's just sort of a quick discussion here of how we got here. So we started out through Act 78 as the intent to increase economic activity at some of these airports through a master hangar permitting program. So we went at each of the airports and permitted to the extent feasible a lot of the development that could possibly happen at some of these airports. From then, we recognized that there were opportunities to help developers out as they work with a sponsor through the different authorities having jurisdiction, or individuals or entities that would impact development. And we developed that guidance document, which is now available on the state website, as well as a checklist to discuss that process and a flow chart. And we're also have erected some of these signs outside the airports as just, hey, look, this is some of the available land that you could develop. And now, as we've worked through some of the process, we've seen that, you know, improving minimum standards, what we're doing here tonight, will help developers and improve operations on the airports just by providing a fresh new look at how policy is currently here to help users and developers at the airports. Next slide. And this is the last long-winded piece for me, but some lesser known items. I mean, we kind of know that the airport serves a function, right? You know, community access through air taxi charter services to other populations that might be more remote, or commercial and industrial activities with air cargo, manufacturing, and obviously tourism and access to special events. But there are lesser known items such as agricultural support, aerial surveying, the USDA rabies pellet drops out of Berlin, as well as, you know, aerospace research opportunities. But what's really important is all of these airports across the state, they serve a role for emergency preparedness and response, both for your law enforcement or your med flights or pet rescue, aerial firefighting, disaster relief, emergency response. Having these airports, not only from an economic perspective, but from a greater sense of community, they serve an important function. And so I think it's important to just state that for folks. There's lesser known. Next slide. All right, so I will end here, and I will give it over to Mike. But before I do, just remember, we're going to give you what we know from the public based on these survey results, and we're going to give you what we know from the AOT based on their knowledge and what we've heard from other folks. But we're going to rely here at the end to get your feedback. And so anything from, hey, AOT, you're doing this really great, or hey, AOT, maybe there should be improvement at in this area, or maybe I heard you brought this, you mentioned this in these slides coming up, but I have another perspective on that. I'd like you to understand, and so we're here for that. And so I thank everyone for listening to what I had to say, and Mike, you can take over now.
If I can get out of this chair. If I can't get out of this chair, then I'm not going anywhere. I think I'm actually going to stand sort of over here near Michelle so she can help me primarily so I can see the screen. We got enough stuff. Good evening. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible so we can get to your comments. For anybody I haven't met, I think, which is most of the folks in the room, my name is Mike Sherling. I'm pleased to be helping out with this project, and I've been flying in Vermont since 1986, primarily out of that airport that's in the county that's very close to Vermont. I think they call it Chittenden. And I've spent most of my time in government, both with this, I did a full career with the city of Burlington, and then I served as the Commerce Secretary and the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state. A lot of fun doing that. So I'm going to walk you through the process itself. Very briefly, and most importantly, what we hope some of the outcomes are, so that you can give us feedback both on the process as we go forward, but also on the most important things, which are areas for improvement, areas for modernization in policy, process, operations, etc. We'll go to the next slide. Not going to go through this in grave detail, but this is an outline of the process itself. Wide invitation to participate was sent out, press releases were sent out, a survey opened in middle of June. It's opened until the middle of August, so if you haven't taken the survey, there's going to be a link in just a second, but if you just Google Vermont Agency of Transportation Aviation Survey, it comes up in, right at the top of the Google search. A variety of public meetings. We're approaching the end. Next week there's 2 more. We have six behind us, and 2 to go next week. And most importantly, these won't be the end of the process, nor will the survey, nor will the end of this modernization process be the end. Like Robert mentioned, one of the things we want to build is an ongoing mechanism for feedback from users and stakeholders at airports, and a bi-directional way that information can go out from VTrans and other folks that operate at airports about things that are going on to make this a continuous improvement model. Next slide. Link to the survey itself. We can pass over that because that's easy to find. Very briefly, I'm going to give you the highlights from 4 questions based on the preliminary survey results that we've got so far. So what you're going to note is that none of these things are going to sound particularly surprising, and there's some very common themes that flow between these 4 questions. So in the top 5 most important factors for users in selecting an airport, location came in number 1, price of fuel, facility condition, availability of hangar space, instrument approach availability, and then costs and fees rounded out the top 5 responses. Top 5 in things important for AOT's ongoing modernization efforts, for what's happening right now. Hangars came out number 1 and number 2, so hangar facilities, use, conditions, support, things like that. Hangar development process and opportunities, we're going to talk a bunch about that as we go through the next couple of slides. Commercial use of airports, policy development process, and lease rates rounded out the top 5 there. Again, start to see those common themes. Challenges: insufficient hangar space, hindrances to development. Anybody ever try to build anything in Vermont? It's not just airports. It is very difficult. It is quite expensive. It is a lengthy and often unpredictable process. It's not just airports. So it's not a wonder that that came in at number 2, and it's number 2 on the next question that's coming up as well. Communication, we're hoping to fix some of that. Cost and lease rate challenges, and unclear maintenance and repair standards rounded out. Again, the top 5, that doesn't mean that was the last thing, but this is just the top 5 answers for each. And then opportunities for improvement, fuel availability, hindrances to development, hangar availability, those 2 go hand in hand, of course. Facility conditions and maintenance, and communications and support. So some of the 4 key questions in that survey, there are some very common themes that emerge pretty quickly. Next slide. At the end of this process, which is going to, the process itself will sunset late next spring, or I guess it's still spring in May. Certain parts of Vermont, it's still winter. Expected deliverables, the updated policies, procedures, and conditions, an assessment of the lease rate structure, which we're going to talk more about in just a second, and possible improvements, enhancements to community engagement and involvement in airports and economic development. So what kinds of things that, whether they're direct aviation or tangential to aviation, workforce development, business development, entrepreneurship, churning out more pilots. This airport does a great job at that, churning out more mechanics, all the things that both for general aviation but also for commercial aviation. When you want to hop on a plane and go to Hawaii in 20 years, you better start churning out more pilots, or you're going to be in a longer line than you're in already. Next slide. Among the things that we've already talked about in the preliminary meetings in terms of mechanisms for ongoing feedback and updates are communication channels for getting general comments, suggestions, and questions about the policies and procedures that do get created. So they're not going to be perfect right out of the gate. Nothing is. So how do you get that information? Where's the central location or landing place for all the information? Will likely be a website, a little old school, but that's the way government does things, and that's the easiest way to have one-stop shopping for a place to get information. There'll be scheduled reviews of standards, policies, and procedures, so there'll be a regular cadence established, and you'll know what that cadence is. But as important, there'll be the ability to ask questions, get clarifying information, and then an ability for VTrans to get that information back out to all the airport users about what that policy clarification is. We're used to that with FAA-related things, right? They send out letters of opinion and comment, ask for comments and things like that. And then, as important, an open and fair evaluation of those questions when they come in. So how do you actually involve some cross-section of stakeholders and subject matter experts to help figure out the answers to those one-off questions that will come up after the policies, procedures, operating guidelines, et cetera all get created. Next slide. So here's the topics themselves. Again, I'm going to go through them really quickly because your feedback on them is more important than me telling you what we've already got. But this sort of sets the stage so you know what's on the radar. Hangar use and inspections is on that list, probably at the top, although safety's coming up next, so I put safety at the top. Hangar maintenance and support, hangar inspections and compliance. Anybody ever hear of a hangar that's full of stuff that isn't related to aviation from time to time? So the goal is not to kick out every motorcycle or lawnmower that's parked next to an airplane. It's what's the right balance of primarily aviation use and what does the eventual standard look like in that regard. So interested in your feedback on that, and that'll be an ongoing exploration through this process. And then an example of this sort of middle ground stuff, gap pavement's a great example of it. Falls between what can be funded by the FAA and is typically matched with state government, and it's not a private hangar, but now you've got this section that needs to be maintained, or utilities brought in to develop hangars. It's sort of an area where there isn't necessarily a funding stream, and to go with the reality that building things in Vermont is quite difficult, the parallel reality is Vermont is tiny. We're the size of a mid-sized city, like Boston or Baltimore, and we have to deliver everything a state has to deliver. So the resources are minuscule. You look at what Florida does with airports, it is a completely different operating paradigm. It's a completely different scale. They have tens of millions of people. We have 47 people. It's much harder to deliver. Next slide. Access and security, probably the most important thing. Access controls are different across the 10 airports. We're not necessarily going to get to the same standard for everyone right out of the gate, but what's the ideal state? How do we map out getting the right level of access control based on the operations at that particular airport? What security requirements should there be? And then ensuring that there's a good balance of being able to move vehicles and pedestrians, to load things, to do maintenance, to move passengers, all the things that have to happen for the airport to run day to day, but balancing that with not having vehicles parked in the way so they get clipped by an aircraft wing. I'm not sure which is more expensive to fix at this point. Vehicle maintenance is pretty expensive, and certainly any dent in an airplane is crazy expensive. And worst case scenario, somebody's trying to drive to your hangar and take a left when they should have taken a right, and then there's a runway incursion. So we want to create mechanisms to ensure with consistency that all those things can happen. Next slide. Airport development, all the issues that you're aware of. How do we get utilities there? How is infrastructure developed? What's the role of local government, if there is one, if there's an interest in the particular hosting municipalities? Are there processes for exploring other grant opportunities, particularly around economic development and job training? There's things that are out there that may be ways to sweep in other dollars to do development if it relates to training the future workforce. And development priorities that are going to be specific to each individual airport. So Caledonia is not the same as Franklin's, not the same as Stowe, not the same as Middlebury, obviously. Next slide. Community access engagement. Again, there's a lot that actually happens up here, but trying to come up with some playbooks for how the local community, young students, events might be able to be hosted on or adjacent to airports. How does that weave into economic development, business development, partnerships, and ensuring that we're leveraging all the folks that are working in those arenas on a day-to-day basis, from municipal government to the regional planning commissions, regional development corporations, et cetera. And again, sort of central to that, job training and workforce development, economic development, and no secret, one of the drivers of Vermont's economy is tourism. So the more tourism we can have, the more tourism we can sweep in coming to state airports, the better off we're going to be. And then commercial use, maintenance, FBO operations, flight instruction, aligning the available services with the evolving business needs, and I had an interesting conversation last night about ensuring that the FBO can be successful development is a key component of that. The more aircraft you can base, the more hangars you have, the more flights you can operate, the more successful the FBO can be, the more services the FBO can provide, and it becomes, you know, a symbiotic circle. Fueling capacity and availability, and it's at the bottom of this particular page, but it goes on every page. Hangar space availability. And then the lease rate structure is going to get looked at, so we're interested in your feedback there. The goal is to ensure that there's fair and affordable acknowledgement that there needs to be an affordable lease rate structure, and that it can address business needs, you know, tiered structure for nonprofits and government operations, and then for personal use, and what all those look like. Next slide. Here's the schedule. I won't read it to you. We're in the beginning of the schedule, and then we'll go through a process, and at the end, those final but continuously improved documents and things will be created with a target date of May of next year. That's it. I told you I'd be brief. I think I did it in 12 minutes. Now is the time where we get to hear from you. So the primary goal is to get your ideas and feedback on what needs to happen, what are the topics for modernization, what are some solutions to some of these problems, and we'll take all that down and try to digest it and turn it into actionable progress. We'll start like we did last night. With anybody online, you can raise your hand, or if you unmute yourself, we might be able to see that. I think we can see about 50% of the folks that are online. Beth White has a hand up.
Hi, do you want to stop sharing the screen so that we can see you a little bit better, maybe?
Yep, that's fine.
If you don't share the presentation.
I should explain that I'm wearing shorts because every venue we've been in has been 97,000 degrees. You have the most temperate of the 7 so far.
I open the window.
Outstanding.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think you can just go to, if you go to stop.
Hi, everybody. This is Beth White. I'm from Habitat for Aviation, and can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm also from EAA Chapter 613. I help chair the Youth Aviation Program. And in the past 7 years, we've had over 16 young people get their pilot's license before or just soon after graduating high school. So we are workforce development, and you guys right now are in the EAA Chapter 613 hangar, which is a nonprofit organization, which was all created from raising of money, lots and lots of generosity in our community, and I think that's just something to point out. I really think it's super important for those of us who are working in the nonprofit space to have a nonprofit lease rate. We are not for profit. We are for community. We are for education, and I think our lease rate should reflect that. And I would also just love to collaborate with the state of Vermont on any sort of workforce development grant opportunities so that we can continue doing this really important work in the world around workforce development. We are training the next generation of aviators, we are training the next generation of mechanics, and we are helping those who maybe have been traditionally not seeing themselves in this field, see themselves in aviation. When the runway was being constructed, we had all of the contractors in during our summer camp. We made our own runways with cake with kids, you know, and they learned the process, and they laid down the first layer and the second layer. So we are also just raising awareness about working with these things, our hands, and we're elevating the respect for the trades. And those who love to work with their hands. We had Evan Robinson come and share all about his drone programs and how he uses drones in the state of Vermont, and the kids got to try out a drone. They learned about drones for construction projects, for bridge evaluation. So there's just so much with aviation, and I would love to work with you all to find some workforce development grants to support the good work that we're doing at Habitat for Aviation. For those of you who don't know, we have an all-girl team building an airplane. It's the first in aviation history that a group of girls have come together to build a plane. And that happens every Sunday. And then the first Saturday of every month, tomorrow in fact, there's a plane right outside that door when you walk out called a Zenith Zen Air. And we're building that as a community as well. So lots of good things going on, including Young Eagle events. We would love to get a nonprofit lease rate, and we would love to work with you. In addition, we would also love for the active movement Waygate to be extended to the south. So I'll just put those 3 requests out there, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else online? All right, we're going to turn to three-dimensional people.
Yes, is that a little too loud?
It's also the shortest ceiling we've had in 7 years. Most of them have been like 32 feet high.
Test, test, test. I think that's okay. If you're able, for the public input here, if you're able to come up to this somewhat clear area anywhere, have a limited microphone here, just clearly state your name and provide your comments and feedback, that would be great. We have a minimum of 2. That's an unofficial bar we've set. Certainly a room full of folks, hopefully you hear from more than a couple of you, so. How about it? Sure, yeah?
Hello. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Cassidy McCusick. I'm the local apprentice under Cliff here at Porter Air. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you guys for doing this. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. There's been a lot of headache around this, but I also wanted to start off by saying that the money that you guys spend plowing, maintaining the runways, doing the construction here is really appreciated. The longer runway has been really nice, flying in and out of the extended taxiway has been really nice. The maintenance you guys do on the fuel farm, everything like that has really been appreciated. It makes using the airport a lot better. I remember when I was a student, I came in and we had, what was it, a 50-foot wide runway at 3,000 feet. And that was hairy for someone who didn't really know what they were doing, but it's much nicer now, and I really see the effort you guys are putting in for that. I'm sure everyone else has a much better grasp on the things that really need to be addressed, but I just wanted to start with some positivity. So.
Thank you, and thanks for taking on the internship, despite the fact that you got to hang out with Cliff so much.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I'll share you.
Anybody else coming up?
Yeah.
So anyways, can I?
Yeah, just go for it.
So I'm John Fitzgerald, and I'm the president of EA Chapter 613. First of all, it's nice to see everybody here, and I'm glad we can share our building. We're very, very proud of what we've done here. If we can, I don't know if you can go back to your slideshow, on your slide, but round number 26 was an actual picture of our airport here. And it was a very good picture. And I think you're going to find in that picture that a lot of our taxiways are not paved. A lot of in front of our hangars are not paved. And in the past, we've asked to be able to pave those ourselves. We're turned down for that. We pull an airplane out in the springtime and the tires go into the mud. And we're told that we can't put our own dirt or anything in there. So I'm really hoping that you take a really good look at that and turn this mess that we have out here now into a really nice bunch of pavement so that we can move our airplanes around. If you look at some of our airplanes now, and we do have a club that has a lot of airplanes, and our props are all dinged up, the paint's missing on them, and it just happens all the time because there's nothing but dirt and rocks and that type of thing. So yes, my hats are off to you for what you've done. It's an amazing runway now. The taxiway that you're going to extend to the other side for safety, I take my hats off to you for that too. But the rest of it really, really, really needs to be addressed, and I think it'll be a beautiful, perfect airport. Thank you. I can take that from you.
Facilitator.
I'm Don Jerzik, I'm a hangar owner here, and I have two comments. The first is when the runway paving project was started, just prior to that, the grass runway was closed. The grass runway here existed long, long before I came here, and it seems like the runway was closed for arbitrary reasons. When I discussed it with one of the state people at some level of authority at that time, they said the FAA didn't allow it. And it really was nonsense. So I'm making a plea to consider bringing that runway back in some fashion. Grass runways are used all over the United States, and the FAA actually has a policy about use of grass adjacent to active runways, what uses are permitted and why they are necessary in certain cases. And the second thing I'd like to make a comment on is providing to us some consistency in policy and the ability to talk to somebody who really knows what's going on. And I'll give two examples. When we had the hangar inspections last summer, it was very confrontational. When my hangar was inspected, my airplane was parked in the hangar, and I was told by the people inspecting the hangar that, you know, if you allow a friend to keep their airplane in this hangar, even if you don't charge them for it, you're going to be considered a commercial operation, which made no sense to me, because I specifically said, you mean if I'm not charging somebody to use my hangar, and they just keep their airplane in here, that's commercial use. So they said, if you do that, it's going to be a commercial rate. The second example is, I decided to put heat in my hangar last fall. There's a gas line that runs the whole length of this airport. There are numerous hangars and businesses hooked up to that gas line. So when I went to put the gas line, to hook up to the gas line through Vermont Gas, I was told by the state that I needed an Act 250 approval. And this was in the fall, and they made me go through 8 weeks of phone calls, emails, trying to find out about Act 250 approvals. They wanted to know if my hangar had an Act 250 approval. Every hangar, there are hundreds of hangars everywhere that are hooked up to gas. And when I ask the question as to why do I need this, nobody can answer it. So really there's no one place to go to where somebody just really seems to know what's going on. Eventually, when I found out from the Act 250 representative in Franklin County, said you absolutely don't need an Act 250 approval. But it took me almost 8 weeks to find that out. And when I went back to the state person who told me that I needed to do this, he actually couldn't tell me exactly where that had come from, as to why I was told that I needed an Act 250 approval. So I think that there really needs to be some consistency in policy. I mean, can we keep a motorcycle in the hangar if it's in the back and my airplane's sitting there? My hangar neighbor was told he could not, because that would be commercial use. Because if he kept his motorcycle there, he would be putting it in a place where otherwise he would have to be charged by somebody to keep his motorcycle for the winter. So, you know, and this over the years, there have been letters that have evolved from the state saying what the policies were. And I think we all understand as hangar owners, the primary use of our hangar is for aviation, for an airplane to be in there, for us to be using it, to get the airplane in and out and to fly. But if I have a piece of personal equipment that just happen to store there, it seems that that is consistent with the approved uses. But I think there needs to be consistency than what we're told by the state.
Thanks. That's one of the primary goals of this exercise.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Miguel Marin. I'm the Vice President of the chapter, and also I'm very much involved in Young Eagles and all kinds of activities. So first of all, I'd like to echo all the praise to you for all what you've done. But you talk about safety, and it's been over almost 2 years that we changed the runway numbers, and still all the aeronautical information has the old numbers. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a big airplane come in and said, we came in with less fuel because we thought we had 300 foot of runway, and the assumed approach, and so when are we going to get that fixed? Now, there's alternatives, right? If they don't want to do it because the runway got bigger, and they're going to, and the FAA is going to take, I don't know, two more years or 3 more years or whatever. I mean, you can have a point-in-space approach, right? Yes, the minimums, there's trade-offs to that, but that's safer than skylighting from Burlington or from Plattsburgh. So I think you're focused on the ground safety, which is fine, we like that, but don't forget the air safety. We need to get that aeronautical data first. The AWAS is not providing, the ceiling.
It was replaced yesterday.
It is now.
Okay, we're fixing it.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, I just heard it like an hour. I forgot to tell you.
Get under the radar on that one.
Let's look at alternatives. There's expertise here that can help you with some issues or some alternatives. So you're not there alone. But when we look at the safety and ways to resolve it, let's work together both on the ground and on the air.
Thanks, Miguel. Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Mike Strand. I'm a hangar owner as well as the president of the nonprofit Skydive Club here at the airport. Couple things to touch on from Dr. Majerzik. I can one-up you. The FAA or the state filed a complaint against Act 250 when I replaced my hangar roof. That they didn't like the color. I spent $4 grand on an attorney for AOT to just never reply back. So are our hangars under Act 250 permits or not? Some of them are, some of them were built post. There's no guidance, nothing in the lease says don't do anything without approval. I followed my lease, I didn't change square footage, I didn't add any electric resistance heating, and the state still came after me. And I have a limbo conclusion to that. I vehemently oppose a commercial lease rate, especially a 3 times rate. That's not how to bring business in, to charge them 3 times the normal lease rate. I think the only reason that in my opinion, you'd ever want to start increasing rates is to stop some sort of 1 or 2 entities from becoming slumlords and owning all the hangars, and then the pricing becoming unaffordable. I think there's 2 ways to fix that. One, some sort of progressive lease rate. The more you own, the more you pay. There are some downsides to that, but it's a technique. The other is all these development opportunities that the state is struggling to find people with. Just build the hangars. Build big condo hangars, just like we have at the north end of the ramp, and now you set the lease rates for rental properties. And we can build the hangars that people so desperately need without people building onesie, twosies, T hangars that don't really do much for the community. There are currently 3 lease rates at the field. There are 2 advertised rates, and there's a non-advertised rate of half the private rate. And there has to be some equity in how those lease rates are applied. If the state insists on a commercial rate, I would, well, first off, I would echo what Beth White said, establish a nonprofit rate. And I think one of the ways to do that would be to have things that are quasi-commercial, like our parachute club, Habitat for Aviation. You can make the argument here, although I would disagree with it. But have an ability for these entities to apply for and get relief from the commercial rates. Yes, you have met a standard that you serve the community, it's a volunteer organization, whatever it is, so you can get relief from those commercial rates. And then the last thing is I vehemently oppose the taxiway project. I think it provides a little benefit. The only one is really on a south wind day to avoid back taxi, while crushing the grass runway opportunities that existed for so long. You had people with ski-equipped aircraft that now have no options. You had students from all over the region fly in to get the experience landing on grass, and we brought a ton of people in here. I think spending the money on the paved taxiway takes that use out. It certainly takes away a significant portion of the parachute landing area, which selfishly we're a small number of users, but it would drastically affect that as well. Thanks. One last thing, sorry. I'll end on a positive note. The transparency since you've taken over, Evan, has been phenomenal. What used to be hidden within sewer meetings of Highgate that you had no idea you needed to go to, you're pushing out. Please attend the VAC meeting. Please attend these meetings. Take the surveys. There's nothing that happens without community input now, and you are asking the community to be there, and it's greatly appreciated and has made a world of difference since there's not a train locomotive on your shirt anymore.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I guess it's my turn now.
Thanks for telling.
Okay. If you guys don't know me already, I'm Clifford Coy, former and quasi-airport manager. I've been here with my father here since the 90s. And first off, like everyone else, thank you for taking this on. This has been, I'm sure, a challenging project for you, and it's not going to be without its challenges going forward. In that vein, as you're looking through your modernization projects, are you guys looking to and looking at the best practices of other states and communities with multiple airports to say, this is what works for this community over here? It may not necessarily fit with the state of Vermont, but when you look at the methodologies and the layouts and the prioritizations of other multiple airport administrations, and we can pick and choose those things that would work very, very well here, as opposed to some other policies which would prefer a more closed access approach. For determining safety and access and lease rates, again, I would challenge you guys to look at what's actually required by the FAA. The FAA does not require a separate lease rate. The FAA does not require fences or gates for non-Part 139 airports. And so if we're working on a minuscule budget, would it be better to prioritize taxiways and infrastructure over security gates, which are tens of thousands of dollars, or use a 8-foot high fence instead of a 10-foot high fence? Things like that. I would ask for you guys to look at. And then, and to that end, being creative with working with the communities to reduce our costs. So I can remember when we first arrived here, the local neighbor mowed the airport. So that's not an insignificant cost that we have here. I mean, he's mowing, 40 acres of grass twice a week. That's a lot of money in diesel, as opposed to reaching out to our next door neighbor who could hay the whole airfield for free and take the hay. And so it's those types of solutions which I think work really well for Vermont and our communities. And that's what I have. Thank you so much. Are you standing up?
Yeah.
All right. Here. Stand off, but do it. Or,
I'll get you a mic right there, if you want. Yeah.
Besides wanting to thank you for doing things well with the new runways and things like that, specifically for hangar use, I noticed you had active aircraft in the hangar stuff. And that's kind of a sore spot for me, because we've got 3 hangars here in the airport that haven't had an airplane moving in and out of that doors in over 2 decades. And that's just ridiculous use of space and time, and I don't know how you're gonna address that, because they've got leases that don't tell them they have to have an active airplane in their leases, and so when you write future leases, you might consider that, and when does an airplane become inactive, and things like that, so it's important that we make utilization of the existing spaces as well as continuing on. As we all know, they've already done Act 250 permits for some hangars to the south and hangars to the north. Those permits are worthless until we decide how we're going to take airplanes we're going to taxi to them. And as far as I know, there's no plan for the state to put in taxiways at all at this point, and nor they can afford them, or if they're doing them on a 95% through the government, I don't know. But we used to do that. I mean, previous administrations did find last-minute grants that weren't taken up by the feds or were not filled out properly, and was able to turn them into things like taxiways and things for 95.5. There's also the possibility of, if we decided to develop the south to the south, we could work with some of the developers. So for instance, as somebody's already mentioned, if we put up condos with like 10 airplanes into the south instead of the 4 boxes that they put in a row that are 50 feet wide and space between them. I did a little bit of the math, and we could probably put in 10 condos and sell them for 40, about 90 or 100 grand a piece, which is about what they're going for today, for something in that range. That would give enough money to do most of the paving. So if you did the 95 in the state from the feds and 5% from the builders, is that a possibility that the private funds would provide the 5% if the legislature wasn't happy to see that 5% paid it the other way? That's one of the possibilities that could be done. So there's opportunities to work together to develop that areas. Now, I'm not sure that when the Act 250 permit was issued, if the engineering was done already for the taxiways. If that's not done, then that's certainly a great cost that nobody's going to pay for privately. So if the state didn't do the engineering at the time that they did the Act 250 permits, that's something that should be done and not overlooked. So, and that includes the taxiways to the north as well. So is the engineering done? Question mark. If it isn't, how are we going to deal with that issue? So those are the couple of things that I talked. Of course, I've only been here since the early 90s, so I don't know much about it. I'm still doing things on it. So, but I appreciate the way they've worked in some cases. In some cases, they've been very, unfair, where they've gone after certain people, and where the next door neighbor is doing exactly the same thing, they don't go after them. So there's been a lot of sort of political act going on, and we're hoping it ends. So that's it.
Thanks, George.
Thanks for being there.
Wow, there we go.
My name's Kevin Dwyer, I work with Cliff, and I'm generally the guy that answers the phone here most of the week. And in the state's infinite wisdom, before you spend $250,000 to do a study on whether you need hangars or not, we get 5 phone calls a week from different people, all wanting hangars, and we have a waiting list of about 20. So in terms of fiscal, it makes sense. There's definitely a need and desire. And I think that's nationally, and I think Vermont's a great place to be, and people want to fly out of here, so I think that's helpful. I'll make this next statement without, I have to say as a taxpayer, I cannot understand how the A&R and V-Trans cannot work together, and we can't figure some of this stuff out. It's mind-blowing, and it's sometimes we hear rumors about how money changes hands from one entity to the other to get a permit from FAA money. It doesn't make sense to us as users. We don't get clarity. But we've been laboring over usage here. It's an airport. That's what it is. I know there's birds, the birds will hopefully move, but it's been a major bone of contention, and we need to understand it, and I need to understand it as a taxpayer, because it seems to be a lot of money spent on this. Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
I guess I've got to say something. I've been here damn near as long as George. I'm Kevin O'Shea, had a hangar here for a long time. And have seen all the changes that have come and go. When I built my hangar here, at the time, a guy named Ron Shadroy, and I called him up and said, okay, I want to put up a hangar. Okay. And then I just went ahead and built. And then the guy next to me decides to build a hangar that's twice as big. And I looked at it and said, well, with your standoff, your hangar is going to be right in the middle of the taxiway where I need to get my airplane out of. And so how are we going to fix this? Called up Ron Shadroy. Says, oh, just move that other hangar, the big one, back to the fence and ignore the 20-foot set-off. And we've gone from that to the fact that now we can't even build hangars here. We've gone from this, it looks like something out of Tijuana when you look at some of the way these hangars are scattered around and so on, to now we can't seem to get out of our own way on getting hangar construction going. I do want to second Don's remarks on the grass runway. What was really galling on the grass runway was it was so arbitrary, and there was no communication. It was simply, it's closed. Put a note out, bang. No comments, no nothing. And all we did was try to get some answers. Why? Why can't we use the FAA mechanism to approve a runway and so on? Nothing. And it just struck us as being very punitive too. What would help enormously here, and certainly are making some great first steps, is better communication. The communication at this airport has been horrible. We have no means of any formal communication. There's been a newsletter. Let us know what's going on. What about, why is it that Franklin County Field Days has bounced out of here? Why don't we understand any of the information that you're working under? Share it with us. Perhaps get a better understanding as far as why some of this is taking place. But this arbitrary and capricious nature that we've seen with the past regime and so on has been terrible. So I have great hopes that now we're going to see a better day here, and thanks.
Thank you.
What else? I had George and Kevin both beat. I've been here since 1965. My name's Dan Handy. Born and raised, obviously around here. Kevin remembers, I think, when I was a little bit younger. I think the hangar started out well-intentioned here. The biggest problem is there was never a master plan put in place. And that's why it looks like the Taliban has moved in. And it's been, the infrastructure I think has been haphazard accordingly. The grass runway is a critical thing that I think needs to be returned. And pretty good comment so far. Thank you.
Hindsight being 2020, I think everybody in Vermont would have built everything they needed back in the late 80s and early 90s.
Any more? Oh, we have a hand. Beth, yep.
Hi, I'm back. I have one more comment. I feel like it's time that we rewrite the narrative about aviation in Vermont, because this isn't just a playground for the elite. We are like a hands-on, homegrown community. We're hardworking Vermonters. Most of us are flying like 1970s airplanes that basically cost, well, at least a few years ago, how much it cost to buy a used car, right? We're maintaining these ourselves, and we're proving that aviation is for everyone. And so I guess one of my recommendations is like, let's work together. I know that Sarah Jo Marcotte put together this great film. Was that like 8 years ago? I think, Mike, you were in it, and like a bunch of us were interviewed. Like, let's take that to our legislators. Like, it's us who are flying. It's our kids who are learning how to fly. It's not folks with like gigantic jets, you know, jet setting in and out. Like, we are local, hardworking people. And so if we can start rewriting the narrative about aviation in Vermont and open it up and be more inclusive, I think that would be really beneficial for everyone.
That's a great point. We'll take the jets though if they want to buy a lot of gas and spend a lot of money when they're here.
I'm not anti-jet, but you know, I think it's just important to kind of level set and, you know, who are we? Let's get to know one another a little bit more and maybe have a communication effort to sort of spread the word about who we really are.
Could do a competition between the airports to viral videos.
We like to call it cooperation.
Any other thoughts?
So, but I will bring one thing up.
Yeah.
So there's, so as far as the EAA is concerned, there's 5 EAA chapters in the state of Vermont. And in years past, we used to have a consortium with 4 of them at the time would meet 4 times a year. And then now there's a 5th one. And I guess what I'm gonna offer is that maybe the state would once again, because the state used to come to our meetings, and offer those meetings again. EAA chapters, we have over 100 members here, Rutland, Springfield, Bennington, Caledonia. We could bring those chapters together, and I would offer you that any information, because you're always trying to find information, is we have a newsletter every month. If you want to send something to us and put it in our newsletter, we're going to reach out to 100 plus, and really it goes out to 100 plus active members, but then there's all kinds of other ones. So I would say that maybe once again we could go back to that, put our chapters back together, and maybe offer communication through our chapters also. Okay?
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
And what's the EAA?
Experimental Aircraft Association. She's always doing that to me. She's a good mentor.
Do we have others in the room?
Yeah.
We're on round 2 over here in this one.
Still got 36 minutes.
We're almost out of gas over here.
I get nerves.
Just to add on to what Kevin Dwyer said, the birds are a problem. When the runway first reopened, we had at least one, I think it was 2 bird strikes, and I can tell you flying in and out of here multiple times, I've had to dodge vultures and other things. I know the ANR is a whole thing that I'm sure you guys are dealing with, but as a public feedback, it is a problem.
Thanks, guys.
I was just gonna say it's a poker run.
There's a poker run on Saturday.
So this airport's been here over 100 years.
Yeah, it's 100 years next year.
So there's been an airport here
Should be a party.
that's been over 100 years. I should say hats off to Dan's father, who was really the leader in getting the state to acquire a privately owned airports around the state. I've got a lot of information on that, and when that happened, he and his father, Floyd Handy, and Mr. Valpreda were the ones who were critical in getting the state to acquire those airports before they went totally defunct. And that's why we have such a strange thing as 10 airports in a state with 500,000 people. I mean, we're the size of a county in most places, and most of these around the world, around the states, would be county airports. They wouldn't be state airports. But that's only because we have no county form of government, pretty much, in the state of Vermont. And so that's why it fell to the towns. and then the towns, the state picked them up from the towns. So some of them were towns airports, some of them were private airports. Franklin County was a private grass airport until the state acquired it. And you're right, they did acquire it with federal money back in those days. And I don't remember what the actual division was, but I can look it up. And so that's really the history of it. And of course, back in the days, there was 2 grass runways here, and that's all there was. One that went at an angle and one that went east, north and south. And that worked pretty good for the first 65 years or so before the state got involved and put in a paved runway. And the state was smart enough to put in a grass runway legally by the FAA, sanctioned by the FAA. And then the state of Vermont decided that was unsafe and just shut it down. But as people have said, there was no feedback allowed.
Yes, sure. Anybody else in the room?
All right, my name is Andy Stricker. I'm an aircraft owner and tenant. About a quarter century, I immigrated from Switzerland, where I actually learned to fly on an airport pretty similar here, and I got infected with the virus aviaticus, which there is no cure. You just can go fly. That's the only thing you can do. Switzerland is about twice the size as the state of Vermont and has a ton of such little airports. And in that decade where I learned and loved to fly, I've seen several of them being closed. And what happened is the population started to encroach on them, and there was more and more pressure to have the airport closed because of the noise, and some people were jealous that these guys can fly, we don't, and so on. And our local airport was similar also, with a grass runway, same length. I was flying Porter with jumpers, and a grass runway is perfectly fine. If it is well maintained, it's safe, and there is no reason not to have a grass runway, and for some aircraft it's even preferred. Next to it was also a 3,000-foot runway like here, and then there were 2 more grass runways for gliders where they did glider towing and so on. So I don't see a reason why not build a taxiway, grass runway in parallel, and a paved runway, a hard surface runway. So that's definitely a solution that works. I've seen it work. My home base, Grantham, had something like in the 20,000 movements per year, so not few, and it was safe. We never really had an accident or anything in those 10 years I was there. And I also would want to say that you guys must realize that you have jewels here in Vermont. These little airports are important. They're gorgeous. I've seen them going away in my home country, and make sure you keep them. And the way you can keep them is also if you start not just have general aviation there, so that you would also attract businesses. My home base had several aircraft maintenance facilities. There were aircraft part manufacturers on site, and that actually really helps the acceptance of the public around it. Say, oh yeah, it provides jobs, it provides revenue. There is a reason why this airport is here. It's not just for a couple of guys with fancy planes that love to fly. And so I really would encourage VT Trans to make sure that they can somehow attract businesses and start commercial operations on these smaller airports, because that really increases the sustainability of the airports.
Great point, thanks.
Hold on, I don't know what he was just saying. So, hi George. My name is Jeff Hogan. grew up on the last house on the end of the runway at Shelburne, so I've been in aviation all my life. One of the things in Vermont that I've noticed in the last couple of years is we're really about ready to hit a big boom. Beta Technologies has hired a bunch of people, there are over 400 in their employees, and every one of them has an opportunity to learn how to fly on the Beta dime. And we at VFA, I work there, we run in there through their program. So all of these people are going to learn how to fly, get their license. They're going to buy an airplane, and what are they going to do? They can't rent because there's not a lot of spots to rent airplanes. They're going to buy. And if they fall in love with aviation, they're going to be, oh my God, all right, I got to find a place to put my airplane. I got to find a place to work on it. Really, the spike is going to climb hugely. And that's what we're looking at. And we've noticed it in Burlington. You think of the traffic pattern, the bulk of the traffic in that area is amazing, and it's all because of these students and everybody wanting to learn. And then second to lastly, yeah, bring the red grass runway back. Our old N3N is on the back corner there. We've had it for 56 years. I'm 10 minutes from here down the road, so she's coming to this airport. And I got 2 young daughters that gotta learn how to fly it, so we've got to keep it going. Thanks. Good job, by the way.
One more comment. I don't know if everybody's aware of what's going on in the national FAA, but they recently passed the Mosaic film plan. And what that's done is made almost all the small airplanes that we have out here can now be flown by sport pilots with no medical, with a driver's license only and a very reduced amount of training to get to be a sport pilot. And my guess is that once people realize that they can get into a Piper Cherokee or get into a Cessna 210 with a constant speed and retractable gear on a sport pilot license. And with a sport pilot license, they drive on they only have to produce a valid driver's license. There's no medical. So I think there's a tsunami coming from that, and we ought to be ready for it.
Thanks, George. Round 2 takers.
Half an hour. You are right on, well, almost all of them have ended, are right around 7:05, so you're right at the normal.
Is there a feedback mechanism here on what all our comments?
Yeah, the question from Kevin, right?
Yes.
Yeah, is there a feedback mechanism for the comments? So these comments are being meticulously recorded and added to and synthesized with our aviation consultants. And what we're hoping to glean for each airport is specific areas of focus for the comments, and then utilizing those to help inform the creation of these policies. So this project will not be successful if those feedbacks are not considered and implemented successfully. I think there's certainly compromises from the agency, compromises from the users. There's definitely middle ground to be had here. And it's with the whole picture and the whole understanding of the needs of the agency and the users that we can work with our consultants to help us come out with the first iteration of these policies. And it is my intent wholly that when these come out, you say, oh, well, we were heard, okay? And here's where it's evident. I think, as Mike has suggested quite a lot, that we're probably not going to get it on first draft, right? And that's why it's so important to have those cadences in which we can review and come back to bring these things. And what's working after a year, right? And if everybody, including the agency, says, wow, that didn't work very well, we got to be able to, in an agile way, revise that, right? So, again, very important to have this feedback from you all, and it is being heard in great detail. I'll assure you of that. Thank you.
And one of the goals is to ensure that what gets created is simple and intuitive to navigate, and is not complex and cumbersome to navigate. There may be additional pages of clarifying details and things, but you should be able to interpret the general operating procedures and rules without having to sit down and read for 4 hours. It should be a fairly, and or hire an attorney to tell you what the definition of is. So That's the goal anyway.
Yeah.
Hand the mic out there.
Just two things. Are you guys also utilizing the minutes from the VAC Council in establishing your policies and procedures?
Yeah, that's actually really good. Yes, we certainly are looking back into known issues again, or friction points, right, that have come in the history, but very specifically, and Cliff being a VAC member, this is certainly relevant, upcoming throughout the next, the next 3 VAC meeting cycles, we plan to utilize those as checkpoints for progress here. And then this is a monumental effort to visit the 9 airports and to hear from you. Everybody's, sacrificing their schedules to be here. So the scale of coming back to the whole group to say, hey, what do y'all think? It certainly isn't like practical for forward movement, but what we do have is the VAC members and specific airports have airport committees to help kind of synthesize, and if we have specific sticking points as we're working through this policy development, we definitely plan to utilize those VACs as, okay, hey, we're getting stuck in this specific item. Can we utilize the VAC as like a subcommittee, right, to say, hey, let's figure this one specific out. And use those VAC members who are a wide representation of aviation users in Vermont to help us continue to focus in on what we, that first and final but first iteration of our policy development.
So I don't need to repeat myself from the VAC Council meetings of all the stuff I stood and spoke on.
No, well, certainly, anytime you feel so inclined, we're here to listen to that. I'll leave a comment box on the side of my truck, right? But valid point, but I think it is fair, and again, that can be achieved sort of, through directly to me or anybody on our team to say like, hey, don't forget, it was 2019, but this is still a sticking point that you may have not touched here, but I want you to still consider it. That's valid. That's all valid feedback.
Thank you. And I think,
Whoever gets first.
Busy corner over there.
Real quick, I think, Kevin Dwyer again, we had you could say a flashback last week. I don't want to go back into ancient history, but last week we all got an email that said there was damage done on property, and there was vandalism, and the trigger came back immediately. And do we all know what we're talking about? I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, please don't do that anymore. It brought us back to a time when it was a different time. And our phones lit up, we had many phone calls, and when I called the source of the email, all I could get was, I can't talk about it. It doesn't work. Thank you.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'll address that.
it just was not addressed.
So I'm Michelle Boomhauer, I'm the Division Director for Policy Planning and Intermodal Development for the agency. And so aviation is within my group, and I also want to thank you all for being here, for participating, for giving us your unfiltered feedback. It's important, we need that, and we look forward to working with you all going forward. When we have a safety issue, which this vandalism is considered a safety issue, there was a second issue of vandalism where the contractor's ECI had items stolen from their equipment, in addition to the vandalism of the sign out front. And you all are our partners in making sure we're keeping this airport safe, that users feel confident here. And I apologize if there was an element of the communication that might have generated some fear in folks. Maybe that's why you get the calls, or maybe it's other reasons.
It was vague.
It was vague.
Super vague.
Right.
And everybody thought their hangars were at risk, their airplanes were at risk.
Yep.
And it had nothing to do
Yep.
with personal property.
Right. Well, the issues are getting closer with ECI having the issues they're having. So I don't want anybody to have fear that your hangars and your personal property are at risk. Part of the reason we have a fence and a gate, it's not all the way around the airport yet, but that is in the plans. So I think it's just important for people to be aware. And if you have an issue that comes up, you gotta call us and you gotta call the state police. It's just kind of basic safety protocols. So thank you for bringing that up, Kevin. And we'll be a little more mindful and maybe work with the FBO in terms of how we communicate this, because we don't want to hurt your business either.
Well, it's just a level of priority, so like,
Yeah.
this was an act of vandalism, it wasn't an act it wasn't an aircraft or aviation-related incident.
Gotcha.
It was something that happened on airport property.
Yeah.
But the distinction wasn't made in the email,
Yeah.
whether this was
Yeah, aviation or
an
non-aviation
aviation-related
related. Yep, thank
incident
you.
versus. So
That's good feedback.
That's the distinction that really would have helped out a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. Oh, here you go. Okay.
So I have another question, and I'm not sure if you can help with this or not, but I'll throw it out there anyway.
Maybe.
So we're having water and sewage into, many hangars, so the first question is why it stopped where it stopped, and not to all the hangars? I'm lucky that, it's in front of my hangar, so that's good. But well, first of all, I know you're aware, but we kind of don't know what are the next steps. We were told, and this is more the town, I guess, to sign up, and we signed up, and I don't think many of us know what are the next steps, or what do we have to do, or is it done, or when, or, so any feedback that you have, if you have any, would be great.
Yeah, no, fair enough. This certainly is a unique situation where a town is, extending utilities through another town on airport property to private hangars and public buildings. It's kind of like one of these domino effects of layers of management of a project. And to be fully honest, I don't have those specific answers for you. But with that being said, what I can do is facilitate the communication with the project managers on behalf of the town. I'd be happy to do that for you and to help you. I know, like John has had something we've been working through, and it's been a challenge, certainly. I'm not gonna stand up here and say it's been all flowers and roses coming down Airport Road. It's been a challenge. But all in all, I think the effort will be worth to have those, especially in the vein of airport development, having that infrastructure here. So if you want to follow up, Miguel, I'll definitely be happy to at least get you in touch with the right people to help understand, the impetus around specific decisions relating to how far the water line went, versus is there additional plans or what are next steps. So, yeah, happy to follow up.
Thank you.
Yep.
I might be able to answer that question.
Excellent. Yeah.
Hi. Oops, sorry. Vern Brodsky, Highgate Select Board, also a pilot. To answer your question, the project's going to end this September. It should be wrapped up. It's going to end right there. The deal was the town of Highgate wanted a symbiotic relationship to promote development here, not only at the airport but beyond the airport here in the proposed industrial park. So the plan is to stop it here for now. That's all we got when the town voted. I think it was a $5 million bond that we got to build it with ECI. And then from there, we're going to build it further, and we're going to have to get Act 250, that kind of stuff, to get, once we get some partners in the industrial park. Right now, we have none because we don't have the water. The idea was if we build it, they will come. It's starting to work. We're starting to get some phone calls at the town level. I was going to say it's the last, but since you brought it up, I'll float it right now. One of the things I floated at the last select board meeting, since Essex decided they didn't want Amazon warehouses, we're trying to get in touch with Amazon. Instead of having 20 individual businesses back here, warehouses, maybe we get one big one, very reliable one. I'm not flooding, it would just be a distribution warehouse. It wouldn't be a storefront or anything like that. So one of the reasons I thought about that being a pilot too is we got a new 4,001 foot runway. That foot makes all the difference for insurance purposes, right? And performance charts and all that. So it would be perfect for Amazon style commuters, PC-12s, King Airs, Caravans, kind of stuff they normally fly. What's that? Yeah, yes, you should know, yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things we're floating there. As for, like I said, the rest of the water, when it's going to come, is when we get some tenants back here. I think it's about a 10-year project total. We're 4 years into this, and it should be wrapped up. Actually, for a state project that went through 2 towns, Swan here, the airport, and the state, 4 years to put in water zero, it's pretty incredible.
And what can we connect the hangars that
The hangars, that hasn't been brought up in a while. I know there was a flyer floated last year, I saw it. Call the town.
We did that, but we haven't heard anything.
Everything? I'll get on that for you. I'm just a guy.
Especially if it's September, you know, it's around the corner, so, you know,
Yeah.
making plans or whatever. What's your email address?
Yeah. It's on the website. Did I answer your question for now?
Yes.
Okay, I will get you an answer and I'll get you an answer. Okay, very well. I'll just take some notes of what everything's talking about here. Got all that, Amazon. Grass runway. Figured I'd hop on the bandwagon. I'm not a grass runway guy. I've landed on it before. I never really needed it except for training. I'm all for the grass runway. I agree with everybody here. It was taken away for arbitrary reasons. I called the BS flag on that when it happened. I think he talked to me about it. We wrote to the FAA and we got no answers back. Of course, I don't think it was the FAA that did it. I think it was the state that all determined it was dangerous or something. But the grass runway needs to come back, in my opinion. I'm not a parachutist, but I love what these guys do. I love watching from my backyard. It's a lot of fun. It does make business and fun and just contributes to the aviation. I'm not sure about the airport design, but I mean, if we put it back in the same spot, one of the things I was thinking about commercial airplanes, the small commercial ones, we do need a full-length parallel taxiway so they can do a turnaround. Maybe we can build a parallel on the other side, finish it on the other side, do a midfield crossing, something like that. Since we've already got one side, we just do it on the other side, so we can don't have to do 180s and back taxi. So that's an option, and then we can have kill two birds with one stone there. I think that's pretty much it for what I had. But anyways, yeah, the town of Highgate, we're definitely a partner in anything here, and would love to see this airport grow. It's in the right spot. It's, you know, a couple miles south of the border. We got the A35, I think it's gonna be finished also this fall, directly connecting to Montreal. We're gonna see more truck traffic through here, to the port. So we got the interstate, we got the airport, and it's all starting to come together. Just a matter of letting people in. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, you successfully extended another 15 minutes, nicely done.
Can we participate in the ALPD?
Certainly open to accepting feedback, Cliff, at all times, really.
Thanks for coming out, and surveys
Hold on.
are gonna stay up when we're not done.
Good evening. Bob Norris, Senator, Franklin County. I have shorts on because Mike has shorts.
We communicated ahead of time.
That's my excuse.
Anyways, this is great topics. You know much more about aviation than what I do, I can assure you. I want to make sure you're all done, and it appears as though you are. But full disclosure, I am on the board of trustees for the Franklin County Field Days. A couple of years ago, I thought I'd do my civic duty and volunteer, and I walked it into a brush fire here, so to speak. But anyways, I guess my question is, since other gentlemen brought it up as far as lack of communications, through no fault of anyone's, is maybe you could comment publicly as to what's going on, why it's closed down, because I drive down, I represent a lot of constituents. I'm not picking and choosing sides here by any way means whatsoever, but I see 47 plus acres over here with grass growing, buildings just sitting there dormant. I know that the Field Days has received their 60-day eviction notice. We've received mixed messages as far as the FFA won't allow you to lease any further, so on and so forth. And I know, Evan, you're very familiar with the eviction notice, because I think I saw someone's name on the eviction notice. But, and I'm, like I said, I'm not here to pick and choose sides here, but we just finished their 49th year with the Field Days here in Franklin County. It's kind of a big deal for many of our agricultural specialists here in Franklin County, and it brings a lot of people into the county for many different reasons, I might add. So I don't know if you choose to speak publicly about this, but I guess I'd like the public to have some statement as to just why is it that the Field Days was shut down. But having said that, when we say that AOT, Secretary Flynn and myself, he's been working quite diligently with me. He's been very cooperative, agency of transportation, as far as looking for other places for us, as far as offering up space, helping move the buildings, and so on and so forth. But it's devastating to lose such an event after 49 years here in Franklin County. And we have been desperately trying to locate some more properties, and
not even wants a fair in their backyard, where they have truck and tractor pulls 2 nights a week and make a lot of noise and you get a lot of additional traffic in there. I can understand that. And, you know, as far as the field days is concerned, it's kind of hard to hold on to that much property with that many buildings and so on and so forth when you basically, you know, run it 4 days out of 365. So I understand that, but I'm just trying to look for answers here. And I don't have the answer, so I'm wondering if you can just speak publicly about this and put a lot of these things to rest, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Senator Norris. First of all, I do want to recognize the impacts, I do want to recognize the impacts that this does have on the community up here in Franklin County, and certainly understand that the community has a great sense of disappointment at the inability to continue here at the airport. I do want to point out, as mentioned earlier in the presentation tonight, the airports are subject to very stringent land use requirements on behalf of the FAA. And in part with, hey, long-term community planning for the airport, what's best for that airport, we do work with their group to identify areas on the airport property that are identified specifically for aviation and aeronautical use development. And that parcel back there in particular has been for quite a long time identified as future aviation development, and working with the town of Highgate and getting the water infrastructure through here, certainly looking to take advantage of those infrastructure improvements to help grow the economy up here with potential commercial aeronautical use businesses in that parcel. So really the underlying reasoning here is the long-term planning on behalf of the FAA to meet their land use criteria. And again, I recognize fully the impact here, but in collaboration with our federal partners, the agency and the FAA have determined that to be non-aeronautical use for a period of time per year. That would be more fitting of the land use compatibility criteria for an aviation use. So that's kind of the impetus of this long conversation about hopefully finding another spot for the Franklin County Field Days.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm not going to tempt fate, I don't know if we're done. I'll stay all night.
I just want to, again, personally thank you all for coming. And I want you to know that even if it's over the phone, I do have an open door policy, and I want to be available to you all to the mic capability and mic capacity. But I do want you to know we have a team here of really motivated, passionate aviation employees that really want to do good by you all. We want to do good by the agency. We want to be good stewards of aviation in Vermont. And we're very hopeful looking into the future. I think it was mentioned we are coming into the golden era of aviation, the second golden era, right? With advancements, advanced air mobility is certainly in the conversation. Companies like Beta, aerospace research. The future is very bright, and just we're getting back to basics here, engaging with the community, and looking forward to the continued partnership. Thank you all.